And good evening from down under. My name is Ozzy Stern. I am a country Victorian gamer of Star Wars Armada, Star Wars Legion, and quite a few other different games. Today I am starting my painting my second AT-AT. As you can see, I've already painted one and fully based it out with a bit of flames and grass and that down the bottom on the base. This time I've gone a little bit different with this model. I've managed to cut off the pilot at the handle right here. So I will be able to paint him separately from the rest of the base, the rest of the actual machine. Reason why I did that was because I wanted to clean up some of the gaps that were between the tanks here and the exhausts pipes, and also because I wanted to get in as much detail into this area, which is generally hard to do while you have a model sitting in its way. Now, with this model, I'm planning on doing something different than the previous version. I'm still going to paint it in an urban color, but I'm not going to do it exactly like the same color. And with the flame decals or anything like that. Seeing the Rebels have generally always been stated as getting stuff secondhand, retrofishing civilian versions. There's no uniformity in their colorations. Even their generalized uniforms, as you may have seen in my previous videos, are all generalized. They are not one standard color. They have different colors for their pants. They're basically the only thing that they have the same across all of it is generally their helmet. The rest of it is all variants. And I like that idea, and I plan on continuing to do that for most of my forces. The only ones that I'm going to do strictly in terms of a uniform is if I get any fleet troopers, or when I do the actual veterans, if I get veterans that are not Hoth based, they will generally be in a full uniform type. Or if I get some rebel special forces in the battle armor, then I'll probably do that in a set armor style. But meanwhile, I have created a very light whitey cream color. I have purposely left it slightly so that it still has some white streaks in it, and I'm just going to use a dry brush to go over every little bit of my model to try and get a whitish tone, but also looking a little bit stressed. Now, obviously, due to the lighting situation in this room, you may not see exactly it going on, but trust me, it's going on. It is slightly lighter, and it does have a bit of a pinky look to it, rather than the rest of it, which is a sand look. Now, the colors that the Republic have for these are white predominantly, or they will be in like military camo color. For myself, I'm thinking that this is probably one that a civilian has purchased over time. Maybe he's jazzed it up, and then maybe it's been either stolen by the rebels, donated. It may be that this has been used for racing, because let's face it, swoop bikes are one type of race that occurs, but I'm sure that there are other types of racing events that the populace of the Star Wars universe will have access to. Now, I'm really trying not to get too heavy in most of the exposed parts. I'm only just doing a little bit heavy underneath where there are some gaps from the actual priming coat that I did. And of course, when I finish painting this, I will be going back over and stressing it by using a bit of a sponge and just trying to give it a bit of weathering or damage look to it. But this is just the initial phase of getting some sort of starting color that will generally be the base color for the model. The mix for the paint is a bit of the beige color that I use. So this is green ochre, a mix of 2 parts green ochre, 1 part bone hide, and then 2 to 3 of the dead white to mix it all up and leave a little bit of streaks in it, so that when I actually apply it, there will be some lighter tones in sections where that white hasn't been fully blended in. And I will be going over this again with a white highlight dry brush after it's been painted. So as you can see, just by comparing the two so far and bringing it across my lamp, you can already see that this part is significantly lighter than this part here, which I haven't even painted yet, or that part. And you can see that this part is still quite yellow, or a khaki color. So this one I really want to go for a very pale white look, but not white. I want it to have just a little bit of age to it. So I want to really sort of stress this out to say that I want this to be a very old. I'm going to weather a lot of the metal parts so that it looks rusty. I'll be using a bit of brown ink and some rust paints to actually do a bit of coloration around particular sections. But then on the other hand, I'm going to actually do 1 or 2 sections in a completely different color. My thinking is that maybe this person or this mechanic, whoever's looking after it, maybe they had to grab parts from a completely different one that may or may not have been fully repaired already. I'll also be maybe doing some drill holes or some laser bolts, scarring on the model itself using a pen knife, just to give it even more variance to the actual texture of the model. Now, I think that's pretty much good for a first stage. I'm going to leave that to dry and then I will start on the next job. So stay tuned and let's go on and start with some initial colors for probably the seats, some control panels, etc. So stay tuned. So now that it's dried, I am going to do the seat in this leather brown. That's right here. Now, anyone that is a bike rider, motorbike that is, likes the idea of leather. Leather jackets, leather seats, leather upholstery, almost every man toy, car-wise. Generally, most people like the feel of leather. So I'm thinking that this guy, seeing he's souped up his ATRT for racing purposes, may have also done the same with his seat, so that he's got a bit of comfort. Now I just want to put it on. Now, yeah, you can see that it's fading a little bit in. And that's primarily because I'm using a very weak in terms of coloration. It's been watered down slightly so that it just glides. Like so. And you can still see some of that like cracking. I'm going to put a little bit of brown oil over it this shortly, just to get some of those links up, those raised edge that you can just sort of see from the light. But once I put some brown ink on, you'll really notice it. Blue. Yeah, use this one. Just remembering when you're playing with inks, just to water it down. When you feel as though you've got a good spread, make sure to take up as much of that spare oil or wash. As you can see, it's coming up nicely. Of course, quite a lot of people are going to say, well, where are you going to see it? It's currently being sat on. My reasoning is, well, I'll know it's there. And because I haven't made a decision whether or not I'm actually going to re-glue that one, the pilot back on. I may even just magnetize it or just leave it as is, so I can take it on and off. Next, we'll do some control panels. Now, I'm going to initially do some of them in metal, in this gunmetal or any type of dark metal coloration. I'm going to add in just a little bit of null oil into the actual gun. So that when I'm actually making it, when I'm actually painting it, it will have a slightly sheen to it. So you can see that's the original bolt gunmetal down there. That's my mix here. I'm just doing a 1-to-1 very lightly. You can see I've done the middle now. There we go. And then we'll do the same with the metal vein here. Washing down the metal with oil or water does help to thin it out, and as you can see, if I bring it in really nice and close and focus, it actually brings out a lot of the inner shapes, because that oil or wash that you've added into the actual paint will go towards the cracks and leaving the actual metal paint at the top. Now I'm going to paint this fairly standard on this side, because obviously you will want to have it look in some ways similar to my other one. But I'm going to do something different from the other side, and I'll show you what I'm going to do over here in just 2 seconds once I get this metal. Now, tell me, audience members, what happens when metal is left out in the sun for too long? Australia is very common for this. Metal oxidizes and it ends up getting a rust on it. Usually it's a reddy, or it actually takes on a bronze tinge. So I'm planning on adding to that bolt gun metal mix a dollop of this bronze, and I'm going to paint the other vein here in that color. So let me just get this done. So as you can see, it's a much more bronze color, but not all the way out to the bronze. It's still like a dull metal. So maybe the story is that this person needed a deflector array bit for his machine, couldn't get one through his normal channels, went to maybe a junk store, found an old Republic one and took it, or bought it, and just bolted it on it, and hasn't had a chance to do a paint job for it. The idea of having mixed paints, or a very mixed palette, can be quite good. It is hard to get it done correctly though. So one of the things that I'm going to do is I'm going to select a foot joint, probably this one and that one, and they will be completely white, like from a Republic. But then this toe over here I'm going to do completely in something abstract, maybe like a complete red, or maybe even a terracotta, to say that these have come from parts of different machines. So do the terracotta first, and then I'll do the white. So when you're doing piecemeal stuff, think about where it joins up, where the pieces would be. So for me, if I was looking at this being totally separate, I'd be thinking that that would be one piece of machinery. Now, obviously, it may not be 100% accurate, but in many ways, you are painting your creations. So how you perceive the Star Wars universe is how you're going to paint them in many ways. Especially if you're looking at it from the perspective of a rebel force. An Imperial force, you will be thinking that it's very uniform. Same thing with the Clone War faction stuff. The Pike Syndicate and the new mercenary faction stuff, you can go all out with different color styles and variations, even within the one unit, and do things that really are very much different. You can have an entire force that is painted in the blacks and greys range of colors. You can go and have them all in the yellow ranges. You can mix it up a lot in various formats to get what you want. Now, I selected, I'm going to do this one in white, completely white. And I'll also do the actual front spur. Just like that. I do admit, I do love these models that are on the nice bases. After so many years painting very small miniatures, for historical gaming, this is really nice and relaxing for my eyes. Now I'm thinking of expanding this to the actual entire foot range. Now that I look at it, I think that's good enough. Other points, I think I might just put this one in a white. Yeah. Well, those have to be in metal as well. Yep. Yeah. Yeah, so I'm just doing this little section on the side here in the middle. Very nice brush tones. Most things that look like metal will come out looking like metal after you do a wash or two. This is more of a case of just getting those initial base colors onto your model to give you a feel of where that model is going to go. Obviously, I'll go over this again with defining some more of the actual straps, etc. for these. But you can start to see where I'm going with all of this. Now, like I've indicated, I'm already selected that. I'm going to keep this as more of a dull, older, chunky type with some hot rod pieces on it. I'm going to stress this paneling area with a couple of like stretches and that streaks using some rust and also some a nail file that to just sort of give it a little bit of a, like it's been grazed with sand or blaster fire, something like that. I've got still the pistons and a lot of the servos that I need to do in a metal. I'll also be taking a look at some of the Clone Wars books I've got and TV series to see if I can get any further definition on the coloration of these panelings, see if they had anything different, any switches or any screen associated with it. But for now, that's where I'm up to. Yeah. For those interested, the snake, yeah, it's going to be green. I'm thinking a green with yellow striations on it. Just do a light powder coat. So I've painted the trooper in a layered Talon sand and the shirt in a
equal mix of Lothan blue and dead white to create it quite a bit lighter. Now I'm putting some paint on his backpack and shoes with somber grey, making sure that the colour does not stretch onto the pants. Just doing it lightly, finely with a nice fine detailed brush, ensuring that it doesn't go everywhere. And don't forget to also do the soles of the shoes in that grey as well. It won't show up on the model itself, but on the other hand, it's preferable to actually have everything painted. So now starting from the outer edges of the backpack, trying not to get the mechanical sections of it, which will be painted in bolt gun metal or lead bleacher metal. I'm holding this model by the gun because I find that it's easier to twist it around to see different angles, and usually I'd be holding it by the feet, and I've just painted those. So holding it by the barrel delicately is important. Now, not only am I doing the actual backpack in that somber grey, I also need to make sure that I do the backpack straps in that same coloration. So working very lightly with a very fine detailed brush, we just turn it around and just take it gently, just doing one stroke at a time, just to get along the lines of the shape of the model. Some of it may be a little bit difficult to get to because of the angle of the arm, like directly in the armpit area. That's when you have to change the angle. So as you can see, flipping it upside down to get to the bottom side of that backpack. Making sure that there's no gaps between the colours or anything that's showing up the undercoat of the model as best as possible. Now I've also done, you may have seen that I've done his gloves in a terracotta red with a bit of Memphis red mixed in. I haven't worked on his belt yet, that's going to be a different colour. I'm thinking probably a white. Just again going over those areas on the backpack. Just making sure that I have done it all, and there we go. Just put it down to dry a little bit. Now for the ATRT, you'll notice that I've done this section right here in the red. I've also done a panel in white, some Troll Slayer orange on the fins, as well as the metal on the pipework. There is some brass and metal on the pistons, and some fluorescent yellow on this side. Now on this panel right here, I'm planning on putting something special. Let's go grab it. So here we have my decal sheet that I have done for my Star Wars Armada. Now this one I think is pretty much the right size to go on to that paneling. So I'm going to grab some scissors, some hot water, cut it out, and away I go. Here we are, hot water. Yeah, the hot water's lifted already up the decal. There we go, dip it in, let the decal flatten out again. Notice that I've cut very, very close to where the actual shape is. Getting a little bit of water, just so that it transfers easier, and ever so slightly opening up those tweezers. Yeah, just removing the transfer from the paper. And there we have it. Looks pretty good, but I'll use a little bit of water on the brush again just to move it up into the right position where I want it. Again, using the brush to push out as much of the water as possible so that when I dry it and remove even more water, it starts that sticking process to the actual model itself. And there we go. I'll leave the other side blank, but that side I'll just have that symbol in it. Now, to seal it, to make sure it's all nice, I'm going to use this matte varnish just to paint over it. And that should hopefully remove all the excess moisture, dry it up, and also seal it all into the panel so it won't curl after it's being dried. So just getting a brush and using a small amount, just starting from an edge. Now obviously the matte varnish can be a little bit milky, so once it goes on, that actual transfer will not look quite right. That's because of the wet varnish. So then what we do is we get some dry brush and just slowly remove that from the model as best as possible, moving it away from the decal. And as you can see, slowly but slowly, that decal will still have a film of varnish on it, but it's not as heavy. It's a very light, and that should seal it all in, like so. So now I have pretty much finished. A little bit of light finishing there. Now let's clean the brush. Make sure it's all nice and dry from that varnish. Now let's set aside this the ATRT, let's do some more painting from the actual rider. And this time we'll be actually using warp lock bronze to paint his gun. So just putting a small amount on the brush. We take it from the center and just move it out, covering as much of the model as possible of the gun. Using warp lock bronze, it does tend to clump a little bit or spread out after you've actually put it on, seeing it is quite oily and wants to stay with in large groups. So you will have some bleed through of your undercoat, whatever that may be. If it's a dark color, it shouldn't matter too much, like a black. But if it's a light color like this is, then you'll need to go back over it a couple of times and just make sure that you've done as best as you can. Now, obviously, seeing I've already painted the gloves and the sleeves of the shirt, I have to be fairly careful in painting those areas, making sure that this warp lock bronze does not go on to any other section. Here you can just see that I'm just painted a little bit of those areas that have decided to separate out and give it a nice good coating. I generally try only to put a small amount of paint on the brush at a time when I'm doing things like this, especially when I'm doing even small finer detail like the gun stock. I don't want to put too much over color because that's when it starts to move around too much while it's still wet and end up going onto the gloves, seeing I don't want that color. And that's almost pretty much it. Just a little bit of touch-ups here and there. I still have a few things to do with this model. Mainly it's just to do things like touch up some of the colors that I may have not got perfectly on. I still also need to do things like the belt and the face. I'm also going to do that belt buckle. Yeah, I've got a bit of paint here. I'll put that on. But for now, from Aussie Stern, thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe, and I'll catch you again. Bye.